Welcome back, everyone, to the Chip Lunch podcast. I hope you have been enjoying the last few episodes as much as I have, and I'm joined here again by my, I was going to say co-host, but I was trying to think of something else like gunslinger, partner.
What's the like Top Gun like?
Yeah.
Co-pilot. That's not co-pilot, is it? What is it? Wingman.
Yeah, something like wingman, something like that. Braden, how are you? Wingman.
I don't feel like I'm not going to die in this movie though. I feel like the wingman always dies partway through. Yeah. It's like an inspirational.
Well, don't count your chickens before they've hatched.
Yeah, that's true.
So it could happen. We don't know. We don't know what it's planning with that.
Well, if they're watching it, they'll know, hopefully. So, spoilers.
Yes, spoiler alert. Let's welcome our guest, Weng.
Hello.
Are you planning? Do you think that it might descend into this podcast? Might descend into some version of killing Braden?
I don't know. We'll see. I hope
that
not.
would be quite a challenge.
Unless like one of us ends up boring someone else to death.
Well, from the look of it, it's probably not going to happen.
Oh,
should be fine.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's very, very kind.
I like the glowing endorsement.
Yeah. How are you, Weng?
Oh, I'm good.
Feeling good? Rocking the brown shirt.
Oh, thank
I like
you.
that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Is it corduroy?
Yeah.
I think so. I don't know. I don't know. They're comfortable.
Oh yeah.
They look fine.
Yeah. Is that from a special shop that you get it from, or is that?
Oh well, a fun story. This is kind of just. I'm likely going to just embarrass myself as a start. It's,
That's what we do on
This is actually something that I inherit from my brother.
Ah.
Yep. Basically, every year, I don't think my brother will listen to this, but basically, what happened is that not every year, but probably almost every time when I see him, he will have a collection of clothes that he's like, I'm changing it, so you could have them.
Wardrobe.
Yeah, you could have them. And I actually really like it because I am terrible at fashion, and my brother is just much better at it, with his fashion sense. So it's just like, it's a win-win.
Right.
It's
and
a win-win.
free clothes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
good.
Yes,
I pay nothing for for pretty good clothes.
So quality content.
Yeah, if you give me money to buy, I'll probably buy something worse. So so it's actually worked out really well. So yes, this is one of the.
And is he older or younger than you?
Younger.
Oh, because it's usually like like your family's like the younger sibling always inherits clothes and stuff and never gets the new stuff.
Maybe when we were back in primary, maybe there was that very very short period of time. But he is a lot more sporty than me. So basically, like once you hit puberty, it's like our body size, like he just grow a lot taller.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So his body size is pretty much like the same as me. I think now would be very similar. I think in high school there was a period of time he was actually a bit taller than me and bigger than me.
That's
so
interesting.
It's kind of always reverse. Yeah. Which I don't mind. I just do not care.
And are you okay with inheriting clothes that are perhaps a season or two behind what the fashion is?
What's the season? Like you see, this is like how much I do not know about it. No. So the answer is no. I just, I don't care. It's like, oh, they look nice. They look pretty new. Yeah. I think my brother usually keep his clothes pretty well. So I'm like he just pay a lot more attention, and I'm just like I just shuffle them in the wardrobe and
right,
take them out. They look right, then put it on.
There you go. Well, thanks for bringing it on the podcast.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for inviting me.
Let's put a pause on the family chat just for a second though, because we want to ask the initial question we always ask on Chip Lunch is, how do you like to eat your hot chips?
Okay. I probably only listen to a few episodes of Chip Lunch, but I probably can say I'm likely to give one of the most controversial answers. So yes, I do like the the typical hot crispy chips with ketchup. Okay. Ooh. But I actually also quite like cold and soggy chips.
Oh my gosh!
Yep.
Really?
Yep. Wow. For real. Especially those like really thick French fries. Ooh. There was one time I even purposely put it in a fridge. Ooh. For a couple of hours.
Really?
Yeah. And then take it out, and I enjoy it thoroughly.
Yeah, there's something good about like cold and salty.
Yep. Yeah. And also there's this weird texture that I still cannot describe or
potato,
understand. Yes,
yeah.
it just like changed. The texture just changed completely when it's cold and soggy. So the funny thing was, I actually did a quick Google search. Like I don't know why I did that. I actually Googled it when it comes to chip lunch, and apparently in the Google search, most of what comes up is how do you save soggy fries and make them crispy again. So that's all the result.
Like
and I'm like, no, what's there to save? They are good. They're good.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yep.
Is that maybe like you were talking about like the texture and stuff? You know how like ice cream and hot chips go really well together, or is that because that's like sweet and salty?
I think it's sweet and salty.
Yeah.
It's like a different texture, isn't it? Once they like
It is.
Once they're cold for some reason, there's this weird texture that I just really enjoy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Does that mean? Oh no, you probably wouldn't. But I was thinking like, you know how you get like McCain frozen chips, or you just buy a bag of that and just eat it.
Oh no. Okay, that would be a different, very very different thing. No, I'm not going to try that. No, that doesn't sound particularly appealing. No.
So you said ketchup though. Do you put any salt? Like, do you prefer any salt on it? Or
Oh
anything
yes.
Like
So well seasoned chips
Mm-hmm.
with some ketchup.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I do love ketchup as well. I'm
Yeah,
with you.
I think there was a period of time I quite enjoy barbecue sauce, but with chips it's still ketchup.
It usually is like, if there's any sauce, it's usually like a ketchup or something like that. There's not, or gravy, but not many people have said barbecue sauce, I don't think.
I prefer barbecue as a preferred sauce, but I'm not going to put sauce on chips.
Oh, no sauce.
Nah, not very often.
I don't think that's one of my favourite things of having a salty chip with the probably the sweetness of the sauce again. I'm just like, I love being either end of the spectrum.
It's like 10 o'clock in the morning and now I'm really hungry.
It's like, hello Uber Eats. I don't know, why am I calling them?
Hello, Uber.
Hello Uber. Did you see, I heard recently Deliveroo have left.
Oh,
They're
I
leaving
think
Australia.
I saw a headline somewhere, but didn't read into it.
Yeah, it's only going to be Uber Eats. And I think DoorDash is around now too, isn't it? Anyway.
I don't partake.
What's wrong with you?
Well, I live about 50 meters from a bunch of shops.
That's still too far away. It's not. I hardly ever get delivery. Actually, I do get delivery at work. When I don't have bring my lunch in, I get delivery from work, and that's always a nice little treat.
Treat.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Cool. Back to me.
Good to know your eating habits and how much you enjoy delivery.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's always good that we can have delivery.
the chips would be cold. They would be cold and a bit soggy if you were delivering them. Though.
I haven't thought about that.
Yeah.
I never thought about it that way.
Like they'd be closer to what you're aiming for.
It's definitely.
but I like my nuggets hot though.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So usually
nuggets. This? Does that mean it's McDonald's?
Yeah,
If you're ever getting, okay.
Sorry. Yeah,
I don't need to apologise.
We're getting more specific.
Yes, it's if I go to Macca's, usually it's just nuggets.
Yeah.
I'm not a particularly burger sort of guy. So like as in occasionally I will crave a burger, but usually it will be like nuggets. And so waiting between soggy fries and hot nuggets. Yes, hot nuggets. That's important.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very important.
Would you order like them on a delay so you get your fries and let them cool down and then go get the nuggets?
I'll order them, take them home and eat the nugget, and I probably just leave the fries on the side for a good amount of time, and I'll enjoy them. Like, although if I'm hungry enough, I would just
If we're
I'll just eat
talking
it hot.
if we're talking nuggets, what sauce do you get with the nuggets?
Sweet and sour.
Yes.
Yep.
100%. That's something we can all agree on.
Yes.
Sweet and sour is
It's
the number one.
all those like fancy, funky stuff that try them, but it's just
You go back to
like
classic.
whoever invented sweet and sour sauce for nuggets, that person knows chicken nugget.
Deserves a knighthood.
Oh, it's just we need to remember that person.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
we should commemorate them.
Oh goodness.
We should remember them. They should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, they deserve a medal.
The Food
Clearly.
Hall of Fame. Talking about delivery, this is my other thing on delivery.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
There aren't many foods that travel well.
Yeah.
Like there aren't many things that you can get delivered and you still go, yeah, it was worth paying the premium for it. Like, are you going to pay a premium to get cold chips?
No.
That's the thing.
No. That's the thing. That's why I actually don't do delivery that often. Like, I only do delivery if I have a really, really long day and I just could not be bothered to cook anything. Like, so yeah, and unfortunately, fast food seems to be the one candidate that seems to survive reasonably well with delivery.
Really?
I suppose.
See, I think even burgers are just like,
Nah.
Oh well, because I think let's put it that way, McDonald's burgers is kind of can survive under pretty harsh conditions. Let's not get into
apocalypse.
Yeah, let's not get into the detail why they could survive. I mean, gourmet burger now, no, definitely not. But I'm like Macca's burger, they could survive with pretty harsh conditions.
yeah. Well, that's the thing. And the other thing that annoys me, if I'm getting fries delivered, it's like these, like, because I want them hot and crispy, but for yourself, kind of works.
I would be fine. Give them all to me.
Yeah. I think like something like curries would travel okay.
Yeah, Indian, Thai,
Indian or Thai,
Chinese, they all travel pretty well.
Yep. But it's a weird thing because
Yeah.
everyone's like, "Oh, you're always going to get your food delivered," and I'm like, I don't think I do because it's not as good a quality. However, the one thing that I do when I get it delivered, I get corn fritters. They go well.
Oh yeah,
They travel very well. Anyway, that's a bit
important research. Only the important topics on Chip Lunch.
You open so much
You know what you
possibility
can
right
hear.
now.
Yeah.
Now I'm very concerned that now I know too much. I will just like get into the main right
You can't unlearn these things.
Yeah, I know. I can't.
Next time I see Weng, he's like, "I've gone broke because I've spent so much money on Uber Eats."
Or you will see it in me that I grow another. Just like you see my triple chin and stuff, and I would need a camera to point at me at a different angle. So maybe this will be my last podcast.
Is this the first podcast?
And the last one. And the last one as well, because I'll be fat.
Well, let's make sure that we do get a good podcast in, which is asking our next question, which is, Weng, how did you become a Christian?
Do you want the long or short answer?
Long.
So, okay, I'll try. My journey as a Christian, so I grew up in not a Christian family, but my family sent me to like a Catholic school in Macau. So in Macau, for those of you who don't know, is this city that has a lot of casinos. It's right next to Hong Kong geographically. And we were colonized, like Macau was colonized by the Portuguese. So they probably one of the things that they do is, as Portuguese, they have a lot of Catholic church around.
Right.
And also a lot of Catholic school. So I went to Catholic schools. So I think growing up, you kind of hear a lot about those kind of Jesus story. Although, in Catholic school, they don't talk too much about Jesus. Actually, a lot about Marys and the various sayings and so on and so forth. And then we'll have like scripture classes and things along those lines, like in school. So I was sort of familiar with them. I think it was in year 8, I think I was at a point I kind of a little bit, I think I was 14 or something along those lines. And one of my classmates at the time, he was a Christian. And so he invited me to a youth camp. He invited me to a youth camp. I have no idea what it was, just no idea. He told me it was a camp and never been to a camp before. And it happened during summer holiday. So historically, summer holiday is one of those like interesting holiday where, because we have such a long period of time off, like my parents basically just have no idea what to do with us. Like as in, it's like suddenly we have like this 3-4 weeks holiday.
Yeah.
And because they still need to work, my parents work full time. So they were like, so usually what they do is they would send my brother and I to our grandparents in China. And we just hang out there almost the entire holiday.
Right.
Yeah.
Where was that in China?
Guangzhou.
Guangzhou? Is that
it's like the Guangdong province.
Okay.
Guangdong province. So in one of the little towns or little villages.
The provinces are kind of like states?
Yeah. So province is the state,
Right.
and so my grandparents live in one of the sort of small city in there.
Yeah.
Probably not so small now. And so that was sort of, it's usually very fun. But then in that particular year, I was sort of like, I was sort of 14. And I don't know whether you guys have it. It's like when you're 14, you kind of feel you're kind of grown up.
Yeah.
When you're clearly not, but you kind of feel that you're a bit grown up. And so when that friend invited me, I was like, oh yeah, that's and like a camp sort of thing. You're away from your family but not with any relatives. That sounds pretty grown up too.
Yeah.
So then I told my mum about it, and and I don't know, I thought she would say no, but she was just like, oh yeah, like do it. Because I kind of feel like, I never asked her about it, but I kind of feel like it's just, he found a solution. He found his own solution for childcare. So well done, mate.
Yeah, go for it.
And so go for it. And so anyway, so went to camp, and of course it's sort of like a Protestant church, so camp. And I think the first time someone actually preached quite specifically about the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember towards the end of it, you have a little bit of that pretty classic sinner's prayer. So they, invite Jesus into your heart, accept him as your king. So they sort of like very similar to a two-way to live sort of mentality. And I did. I invited Jesus to my heart. And I remember at that point of time, probably one of the key things was just that I have this weird fear of death, or just not wanting to go to hell. And so when the pastor was like, Jesus is the way to eternal life, I was like, yeah, sign me up for that. Sounds great. Like, I was like, sounds awesome. Like, as in, it's just, whoever that person is, so okay, Jesus, okay, all right, that sounds fine. So if he can just get me out of hell, then that sounds pretty awesome. So I don't think I would articulate that way back then when I was a kid, but I think that was pretty close to the logic at that point of time. So then I started going to the sort of like a high school student, so fellowship. They have not exactly a pastor, but he's pretty essentially a pastor, but he wasn't sort of very well theologically trained. But basically, he works in a church, and he does a lot of basically the youth leader, you may say. Youth leader, he is very invested in us, very invested in us. So we just hung out a lot, and with a few other high school kids together. And I just get more involved. So that was the time in Macau. So I suppose I sort of grow in my faith, but I guess most of my Christian growth happened in Australia. So that's sort of, I kind of feel like that would be a next stage of my faith journey. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, came to Australia. Should I just keep going?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you came to Australia, though, maybe I'll just ask the question, why did your family choose to move to Australia?
Yeah, interesting question. It was an idea that somehow my parents just had a long time ago.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't one of those like impulsive, we don't know what to do with you, so let's send you overseas or thing. So it wasn't that. I still quite vividly remember when I was in year 6, I think it was my mum, I can't remember who is it, like one of my parents, most likely my mum, make this comment about, hey, study hard, study your English well because we're going to send you overseas to Australia. Like I said, year 6 kid, like that just, okay, wherever that is, like where's Australia? Okay, not Macau. That's sort of, all that I know. Yeah. Sort of like a foreign Western country. That's pretty much all that I know. And so they just always had this idea to send us overseas. Like I think they, it's really interesting because my mom and my grandmother, my dad's mom, the two of them have this, like, I don't know, in my family, the women are the one who, like, just like more risk-taking, very future-oriented. They really think and plan about future, whereas the guys are more like just, oh yeah, we're fine, like, you know, we're all right, like, you know, that's pretty all right. But they've, like my mum and my grandmum are quite future-oriented. They plan about the future, and especially my grandmother, she went through the whole cultural revolutions, and you know, like life in China was harsh, very very harsh, and so I think the story was that she took my dad and my aunt when they were still teenagers to Macau, and because Macau, you know, was colonized by the Portuguese, so you're more like you just have a lot more opportunity. A lot more opportunity. Like, of course, their first settlement, when they first arrived, it was very rough for them as well. But they built a life in Macau. But I think my grandma just have this idea that, you know what, Macau is not good enough. Like one of you guys would need to take the family to an even better life.
Right.
So there's this weird kind of I don't know. Like I don't think she ever articulated us if this is a command that you have to do it. But I think she just kind of put a story in such a way that it's almost like you kind of, I don't know, like I think as I get older, you start to almost feel a sense of duty and mission that, okay, well, that's part of it. I think in all fairness, I don't think they pressure me too much. Like they still sort of like, hey, you know what, that like it's going to be a great opportunity. You're going to, you know, learn a lot, and you know, if you could make a life overseas, then good. If not, come back. So it's still pretty relaxed about it. But anyway, like so they have that plan for me when I was really young, and so yeah. So and why they choose Australia? I don't know. I think at that point of time, that Australia is probably the cheapest option out of like US, Canada, UK. That was
closest to, I suppose, wouldn't it? But yeah, probably be closest. Oh no,
yeah,
maybe not from.
Sort of. Yes. Yeah. Now you talk about it. Yeah, somewhat.
Yeah,
somewhat.
It's like a 9-hour flight to Hong Kong.
Yeah, it'll be like
something like
8-9 hours. So US, it'll be longer than that. Yeah, Canada, US, UK. Yeah, actually, now you talk about it, maybe there's that component in there as well. And and I think, was it in a World Cup or something, like Australia is classified under Asia? So yeah, so
it is,
we're still in an Asian country.
It has been since 2005, 2004, it's been the Asian Confederation,
Yeah. I don't think they had that in mind, but you know, now it's just another reason we're
gonna stay within the right FIFA
in the
Confederation.
Yeah.
Do Macau have their own international team, or will it just be China?
I think we have our own team, but I don't think, unfortunately, I don't think we ever made it to the international level.
Yeah, I don't think Macau made it to the World Cup at least.
I don't think so.
I think they're part of the qualifying process, though. I'll have a look at that. But anyway,
yeah, have a look. I actually don't
specific.
know. Like, I'm pretty ignorant with sports in general.
Can you just tell me what's the difference? Like, because you said you went to your grandparents in Guangzhou. I've got to pronounce that properly. Sorry. What's the difference between living in Macau and living in mainland China?
It's very hard to tell. Like, sort of, you just. I think again, like, I think it's really the opportunity. Like you, I think the living standard is higher. Like, especially when you're back to, like, in my parents or grandparents' era, like the contrast is huge. Like, of course, like as China become, you know, more, you know, richer and more powerful, then of course the big city definitely catch up. Like, especially like Guangdong as a province is very well developed, very well developed. But I think we're talking about probably the last decade or so where but I think back then, like Macau is still, you know, like sort of, I wouldn't say well developed. Like Macau is a very small city. Like there's nothing comparable to something like Hong Kong, for example. Like Hong Kong was very well known to be a big city, whereas Macau is just very small. But because I don't know, like I think somehow there's just more opportunity. The living standard is nonetheless higher, and I think you also earn a lot more. Like from what I could understand from my parents, so they I think you're just more likely to make a better life for your family in Macau than in China. Like I think the earning in my parents' era, I still have uncle and aunties in China, for example. Like I think they were talking about the average salary in China would be probably not accurate, but from my very vague memory, it would be like 3,000 renminbi per month, whereas in Macau you could do the same job and you could earn maybe 3-4 times of, and the living expenses is like it's a bit higher. It's a bit higher, but relatively speaking, you're still more well off. Yeah, moving out, at least in my parents' era back then, like it was. I think for them it's just the right decision. Yeah, and you just have a lot less resources in China back into the 80s, 90s. Like it just. Yeah, it's like there's a lot of things that you couldn't find in China that you could buy and find in Hong Kong and Macau. Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever go to the Macau Grand Prix?
You mean the
the car race that they have every year towards the end
of
the year?
Yeah. Oh,
sorry.
I know that happened. I know that happened because they would block out all the roads and like going to school was a huge hustle, all that sort of thing. But as you can tell from the way I answer it, is that I was completely ignorant. For me, it's just. Massive inconvenience. Massive inconvenience is. I still remember like when we cross the road, usually just cross the zebra crossing and that's easy. But during the race, there's like they were barricade everything.
Yeah, the black and yellow barricades.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they were like hard metals, and I was like, how? Like I feel like I feel a bit sorry for those like. Drivers, I was like, if they hit any of this thing, like how is that going to save anyone? Well, probably save the audience, I suppose. So good for them. But I'm like, if I'm the driver,
like it's all like down on the water is the front straight and all that.
And I heard that apparently. It's also because the road is very narrow, so probably that's one of the thrill.
It goes up, and like it's like got basically like a hairpin bend that's like. I don't know. It'd be like a 30-degree angle or something at some point. Like
I think I know what you're talking about because usually in those car racings at the time, I mean, of course, television will, play that all the time, and they will focus on that one particular corner.
Yeah.
And it's just like how many accidents would happen. It's just apparently, it's a highlight.
It's a crazy place. Crazy circuit, sorry.
It's
insane.
I don't follow that too much. Like when my dad changed the channel to watch it, I'm just like, oh come on.
As a motor racing fan, like, did you go to Macau? And he was like, Weng's just like, so boring.
Inconvenience.
I'm glad like that. I hear people actually appreciate something in Macau that's not casino. So thanks, Joe.
Oh, okay,
Thanks,
no worries
Joe.
at all.
Yeah.
But so there is a lot of casinos in Macau, though. You said, like, so that obviously drives a lot of the economy.
Oh, absolutely.
Stuff like that. Yeah,
like carry everything, pretty much. Yeah. So when the casinos are not doing well, it impacts every single industry.
Right. And obviously lots of people are probably employed by the casinos.
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Like, And I think we just accept it. That's just
where you grew up.
Yeah. It's just what Macau is, really. I think we are okay. Well, I don't know. Like, I think we're okay. I think like Macau people, like, no offense to any fellow Macau citizen who may listen to this podcast, but I think we are a reasonably ignorant bunch that, we just want to, I don't know, earn our money and make our life works, and the rest is just, hopefully we take care of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to moving to Australia.
Yeah.
How old were you when you did that?
I think I just finished high school, so I was about 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was it like, first of all, adapting to life in Australia, but then also being a Christian in that time?
Yeah. So that's an interesting one. So despite the fact that my parents sort of warmed me up about this idea a long time ago, like I think when you need to get to do it, it's a completely different thing. And the time when I came to Australia, like that was still the time where Macau students going overseas is still not a very common thing. Like you start to have more, and now it's a lot more. Like now definitely one of the very viable options. But among my peers, I'm one of the very few who did that. And most of my my high school classmates back then, they would study university in China, in Taiwan, in or perhaps some other Southeast Asian country, for example. So only a very handful of us do that, went overseas. And as a Christian, I remember the importance of finding a church. So I remember I did some Google, Google was already there. Yeah, so did some Google search, and it was really funny. So I was searching for a church, and when I first came to Australia, I actually landed in Perth. So I was looking for a church, and that was when I first encountered Wikipedia, because apparently there was the Wikipedia page for that particular church, and then I found a website. And and then there was an email address or something. So I just shoot them an email. It was like, hey, introduce myself. And it's like, hey, I'm coming to Australia. I don't know, just say hi. You try to connect with them and stuff. And yes, I'm clearly going to within my age. So back then there was this thing called an MSN. If we're in the same era. The pastor and I start to have this MSN chat, sort of just almost like you have this orientation type conversation a little bit, so just just welcoming me, and it was quite interesting. And so came to Australia. I still remember it was 2006 September, I think 2006 September, long time ago. And I think I was living in this thing called a homestay. So basically like an Australian family, so host an international student. So that was how it all started. I guess I don't know how I felt back then. It was sort of like this mix of excitement. I wasn't feeling too sad because I have friends who really miss home. In my cohort of classmate because I actually need to do something called a foundation program, basically like a bridging sort of program, because Macau doesn't have like a recognizable sort of exam that's recognizable by other countries. So despite the fact that I finished like year 12 in Macau, I kind of still need to some extent, I need to repeat.
To university, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So I need to do something before university.
Right.
So I need to spend I think I spent about 9 to close to a year, 9 months to close to a year, I can't remember, to do this pre-university sort of program. And in my cohort, so some people, many of them are just like me from different countries, and many of them from Hong Kong, by the way, and some from China, some from Southeast Asian countries, for example. And so very mixed sort of experience, I suppose. Some of them miss home terribly. My feeling was I was quite excited. Don't know what I got myself into. I hope I can survive. But generally speaking, I was okay.
Yeah.
I was okay. I somehow just have this it should be fine. Yeah. So that was how it all started. And I think the one thing, English was a huge challenge, I have to say. English was a huge challenge. I think when you try to learn a language, especially when you try to learn it on the book, I still remember in primary, you will have this, how do you greet someone? You say, how are you? And then you reply by saying, I am fine. So that's sort of pretty much a script in our head. And you have this weird image in your head. Okay, that's how people talk. You came to Australia. Now, no one say, how are you? Well, yeah, people do in all fairness. But that's not how people talk. I think I was in Perth. One of the really weird experience was on the bus. So when people get off the bus, people would say, thanks, mate. Yep. And I was like, what is that? This Australian sort of mateship or this term called mate is something that I was like, what on earth is that? And I did what a good student should do is check dictionary. You try to check dictionary, and you do find a meaning, okay? But you're like, why would they address each other as mate like that? Why? Like you start to get into that zone.
Yeah.
And when someone start to greet me by saying, "How is it going?" and I was like,
"How's it going?
What going? What's it? What like how? Like yeah. So it was just like really funny, and I was just like, okay. And I think one of the way that I learned to survive is that I learned to copy what people say.
Okay.
For good or for bad, really. For
Yeah.
good or for bad. And I was like, okay, that sounds appropriate. I don't exactly know what I mean. No one seems to be offended, so I probably can copy that. So that was how I learned like my language early on. And I have definitely embarrassed myself multiple times, but turns out all right, I guess. Yeah. So that was my early experience, just weird language and sort of, a lot. I think I survived with my broken English. Like, I got by. I somehow even made through that program, that bridging program that I was doing. Yeah.
So that was in Perth?
That was in Perth, yes.
And so were you planning to go to university in Perth?
Yes, that was the plan. So the initial plan was going to University of Western Australia.
Yep.
Yeah.
And do what?
Psychology.
Okay.
Psychology, yep.
So, and you obviously got into that, I'm guessing?
Well, here's another little story. I think I think this is one of the perhaps characteristic of my time in Australia is that I kind of move quite a bit. So at the end of that bridging program, there's this one guy in our group. So as I explained, because in that particular program, most of the people are, from Hong Kong, China, or from other Southeast Asian country. So you kind of just quite naturally gel with them. Like you gel with people who speak similar languages and stuff along those lines.
Doing the same thing together as well.
Yeah, exactly. I still remember we would hang out and we'll go to drink bubble tea and sing karaoke. So that was, like it's just a very sort of Asian way of, having fun. Yep. And but then we would just speak Cantonese among ourselves and things along those lines. And there was this one guy, his name is Edward, and we all sort of have fun, and I'm kind of known to the group that I'm a bit of that nerdy sort of study hard sort of guy, like relatively speaking at least. And so this guy Edward, he is a bit of a party guy, but he's also quite ambitious, so he wants to do well as well. So then I think at the end of the program, or towards the end of the program, he came to me and he was like, "Hey Weng, like we can't keep doing this. It's great fun, but our English is not going to improve. We're not going to do well. And by the way, I am going to apply for this university in Canberra, ANU, the Australian National University. Apparently that's the best university in Australia. What do you think?" And the Asian in me is like, how come I didn't know that is the best university? How come I didn't know? I never heard of it. Like because I think ANU back then, because they're just good and they just don't care about the marketing, so they probably haven't marketed too much. So I didn't hear too much about it. But of course now they market a lot harder, I suppose. So, really the Asian in me is sort of like, I want to be the best and that sort of thing. So we just get into it. I have to say, like, I am not the adventurous type. So that really put me into this zone of how do I make this decision? I don't know how to make a decision. And I wrestle with it. I talk to so many people, but it's one of those things like you talk to so many people, it's like they all give you different ideas, and in the end you just like live with the same problem. A very vivid memory what helped me was I remember I called back to Macau to talk to my high school teacher.
Oh, wow.
I call him. He's a really friendly guy, and he had experience. He studied in Canada for a long time and then came back to Macau, sort of thing. So I sort of feel like he would be someone who could have some wisdom in it. And I remember something that sticks with me. Like, I think when I called him, he was like, when you're 18, like back then, And it was like, this is not the time to be safe. This is the time to take some risks and just, do something. And I remember that just helped me to go through that hurdle when just like, yep. And so, I started to pay my bags and all that sort of thing. I kind of told my parents they don't really get it, but they're like, okay, as long as it works for you. And so, so here we go. So went to Canberra, 2007, started uni there. Went in the next 4 years. Was there.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what do you think, I was just going to ask you in terms of being a Christian, from like going to church in Perth and going to church in Canberra, I'm guessing you did.
Yes, I did.
Is that like, do you feel like God's working in your life saying this is where you should go and actually should study in Canberra?
Well, I didn't hear a voice. So I wasn't sure, in all honesty. I definitely pray about it. I talked to my church family in Perth, and they're sad to see me go, but they're all very supportive, and they all sort of just support this. I think I pray about it, and I guess, I haven't experienced any huge resistance, and I probably, as I reflect on it, didn't seem to have any particular issue, and I think everything just somehow lined up, and I don't know, it just kind of, okay, I may be stretching this a little bit, but it kind of just somewhat remind me of the the Book of Esther series that we're doing, like really the hidden hand of God, like somehow, and I think, and I think that would be the experience of, I think, just my entire time in Australia. It's just somehow God just made it work. It could have gone wrong in so many ways. It really could have. Like, I've moved from, fast forward is I moved to Canberra, spent 4 years there. I moved back to Perth to do my postgrad, spent 2 years and a bit there. And then I never thought I would end up in Sydney. Never thought. And I came, and I think moving interstate, despite the fact that it's in Australia, I think one thing that I often tell my friends is it's like a mini migration. You're uprooting yourself. And given my personality, again, I'm sort of, I like things that are predictable. I like things, I would like to, I like my little routine, that sort of stuff. So uprooting myself is often something that really pushed me out of my comfort zone. But at the same time, I think when I look back, I'm constantly amazed. Things could have gone wrong, but somehow God just put the right people, provide for me, whether it's job, whether it's accommodations, something that you would take it for granted. You sort of think, if you plan well, then that will be fine. I mean, yeah, sure, you still need to plan, but at the same time, I think that the likelihood that something could have gone wrong, it's just really high when you do something that big, or I would argue is quite big for me. When you need to uproot, you kind of just need to replant yourself in a new place. And I think the journey from Perth to Sydney, that was 2014, was a really challenging one. But somehow, God put me, in here, provide a job, a great church community. And then since then, I'm like, and again, the funny thing was, I never thought I would end up in Sydney. So the fact that I ended up in Sydney, I was still a bit like, why am I here? But then in the end, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to learn to be okay with that if God put me here. And turns out it has been amazing.
So why did you end up going to Sydney?
Well, I was unemployed in Perth, so okay. I basically for job. That's just short answer. I could so that was at the end of early 2014. I think the mining boom is long gone. So hit a lot of the industry, and I was this overqualified, unexperienced postgraduate sort of person.
Yeah.
So it's just as an employer, you're just like, well, what can that guy do? And that guy wants a lot of money or whatever. So no one would consider me, and also I think the unemployment rate was pretty high back then. And so I think despite the fact that I wasn't very comfortable moving interstate again, I just have no choice. And I think I was also a bit. I was in my mid-20s. And I think there was a lot of this. I don't know. You sort of just feel like I really should be working now. I can't just be not working, and I can't study another degree. That's just wrong. That's just wrong. And a lot of my peers would have been working for a couple of years already, so I kind of feel that peer pressure a little bit. Not like no one gave me pressure. My parents didn't give me any pressure. Like they have been very supportive in that front. If anything, they're just like, "Oh, take it easy. We could still support you." But I feel embarrassed at that age. Like, why would I need my parents' support at that age? So then I decided to then expand my job search sort of criteria. For the geography was like Perth. Now it's like all Australia. Like you just change the field from Perth to all. Yeah, on Seek. Yes, definitely. So then of course then like the East Coast, like Sydney and Melbourne, just have a lot more opportunity. I literally just take on any full-time job that I could get my hands on that sort of somewhat aligned with my profession. And I remember the first job that I got accepted was actually a job in I think Tamworth.
Oh yeah.
That was the job that I applied. But then the funny thing was, they accepted me, and then the HR lady then called me, was like, "Hey, by the way, would you consider the same position but in Parramatta?" Now, my geography about Sydney was extremely poor, still reasonably poor right now, but somewhat better. I thought, like, I never heard of Parramatta. If Tamworth is a bit of a regional area, then Parramatta must be another one. Like, or else why would they offer me? Like, it would be something just equivalent, right? Like, you would have thought. Yeah. And then turns out when I look into it, it's like, oh, okay, it's kind of just right in the middle of Sydney. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it really is the middle of Sydney, Parramatta, isn't it?
Well, yeah, clearly. And they kind of sort of brag about the fact that it's the second CBD, that sort of thing. But from what I heard is they talk about it for about a couple of decades. And just disclaimer, I live in Parramatta, so I love Parramatta.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go Eels.
Yeah. Go Eels. So yes, I think that is just another great example that I kind of feel like it's just a hidden hand of God.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first landed, I find my first accommodation. Like, so I found this share house through Gumtree.
Oh yeah.
Through Gumtree, and that was the best housemate that I could ever ask for. Not a Christian, but he's lovely, amazing. Like, I have to say, I probably wouldn't have survived in Sydney if not because of him. I could put it that way. Like, so I think that's just like as I look back, we count like just multiple points where, again, stealing the term, the hidden hands of God are just working hard in there. Yeah.
What was the housemate like? What did he do that helped you?
Like, he's just very relaxed, very friendly. I think he's from Malaysia. Yes, he's from Malaysia. So I think that's this like cultural sort of connection a little bit. Like, I think a lot of the things that I kind of talk about in terms of my culture, he would get it. He would get it, and then he's just like very relaxed, like not tense at all. Like, we'll hang out, we'll do things together, and I went through a pretty hard time at that point of time, and so he was someone like at that point of time I didn't know a whole lot of people just yet. Like, so it took me a while to connect with some of my old friends that I met in Canberra, but it took a while. And when it comes to old friend reconnection, you still need to take time to reconnect all that sort of stuff, right? So you don't just become BFF with them straight away. so this housemate, like, he's just around, he's available. Like, when I went through that pretty rough time, he was just there. He was just there. He was just around all the time. He'd be like, "Yep, let's go and do something. Don't sit on your own," that sort of thing. Like, and he was fun. It was just fun in general. And there are many things that we don't always agree on things. But we just sort of always have this like friendship. Like I think like. Yeah. So I think that was sort of the experience. So that was really great. And then that was, I think, through that then I feel sort of more comfortable. That's when I start to, through work and then through we connect with some of my old friends, and then you kind of slowly expand the circle a little bit. And we start to make a life in Sydney.
Yeah.
What about church? Speaking to the microphone. What about church?
When
you got to Sydney.
Yeah, when I got to Sydney, so when I left Perth, like I talked to my pastor, and it's quite interesting. They explained to me was, Sydney, it should be pretty safe. Like you can probably stumble on a church and that should still be reasonably decent. Like so, I think that was his impression.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, it was just like there's just a lot more sort of churches in Sydney that are more like faithful to the word, that are with good teaching, that sort of thing. And so I was like, awesome. So I think when I landed on, when I know where I'm going to stay, right? So I know where I work in Parramatta and I'm going to live in Parramatta as well. Then I sort of started looking around local churches. And I think I started off going to this church in Parramatta, St. John's Anglican Church. Amazing church building, went there, really great teaching. So I went there for a couple of months. I think the challenge was just that they have great teaching, but it's a bit like you don't really know anyone. They try to include me, I think they've been very friendly to me, but I think at that point of time I sort of looking for a little bit more support and stuff along those lines. And I think thankfully then we connected with some of my old friends that I met in Canberra who originally came from Sydney.
Okay.
And then that was when they invited me to a Presbyterian church in Chatswood Presbyterian Church. And I still remember it was back in 2015. And I remember my intention was, I'll go and visit. I'll go have a look. Went there and I was like, I love it. It's great.
Yeah.
And I think at that point of time, I often tell people that's the comparison, like the local church in Parramatta, because it was, I don't feel particularly connected. So I think my church attendance actually dropped quite a bit. There are times where and I wasn't too very engaged. I sort of go in and I just, okay, done. I just left sort of thing. Or even when I tried to join into any social thing, you didn't feel it. You didn't really feel it. So I kind of start to feel like my spiritual life start to really take a hit in there, and so with this church I kind of feel very welcome, and I think with friends that I already know, they introduce me to other people and they're all very welcoming, and so I kind of just feel like okay. But it required me to drive for 30-40 minutes from Parramatta. So fair enough. Yeah. So
32 minutes, it says.
Yeah, well, I would say 40, taking into account all the parkings and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So it's a bit of a distance, but I was just like, okay, my spiritual life, driving, I'll do the driving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'll do the driving. Mm-hmm. So then that keep going. That keep going until now with West Ryde.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Is that how did you get involved with Soul Revival and with Ian and Grace and?
Yeah, great question. So, and again, this is one of the many blessings that God gave me is, I think just different groups of Christians in my life. And I often describe, especially being I don't have family in here. I'm like, church family literally means family to me because I always tell people, if anything happened to me, it would be my church that helps me. My parents will probably panic and they would love to help and all that sort of stuff, but they can't do much really. So I'm always very conscious of finding Christian community, and I think one of my good friend, her name is Sherry, and she I met her since uni, and she also goes to Chatswood Presbyterian Church back then with me. And she was, I think she was a trainee at City Bible Forum. And then she introduced me. She introduced me to City Bible Forum. And then the other change was in 2017, I started working in the city. So with City Bible Forum, they don't have a strong presence in Parramatta. They only have like a very, very small group, which was lovely, by the way. It was a great experience. But when I started working in the city, that was when I could start to really get involved in their young workers group. And that was when I met Grace. And so that was back probably 2016, I think. Yeah, give or take, maybe about 2016, 2017, can't remember roughly. And that was, yeah, then I started to get to know them, and I started to get really involved in their young workers group, get to meet a lot of Christians. And so fast forward, I kind of have a bit of an idea of changing church, not because there's any problem with Chatswood Prezi, but I think part of it is just the distance does take a toll on me. Does take a bit of a toll, especially when work get a bit busy and things along those lines. So I also have a thought about, okay, and also I also have this idea of like the power of a local church, like that a local church that actually reach out to the local community and serve the local community. And so I kind of feel like me living so far, am I serving the Chatswood community, for example? It's sort of, when I think about it, is that I'm neither here nor there. I'm not necessarily invested in the Parramatta community, nor am I invested in the Chatswood community, for example. So I started to have the idea of, okay, maybe I should look for somewhere a bit closer. I have this weird idea of what's my criteria of close geographically is this 20 minutes drive radius. That's sort of what I feel like is a bit local. Anything more than 20 minutes is sort of not particularly local anymore. So anyway, then Grace, probably I think she mentioned in her in her episode how okay, it actually didn't start with Grace. It was that mutual friend Bethany. So Bethany is another good mutual friend of ours. Really lovely, like very godly, faithful Christian. She invited me. She invited me, is like, we're going to do this Bible study online, because it was when COVID hit us. And I think I was thinking about it, and also all that we were doing back then was just a Bible study online. So, it's like, what was there to do on a Saturday afternoon under lockdown? Like nothing to do really. I mean, there's only so much Netflix you can watch. So I was like, that's another thing we can do. Then I start joining. I believe that was also roughly the time when Louisa started joining, and because I think by that time I know Grace like for reasonably long. Like, I think there's just mutual. There's this sense of trust. Like I don't know. Like Grace just have this vibe of, you can trust her. You just feel that you can trust her.
I totally agree.
Yeah, you know what I mean. And so I think I just attend that online Bible study on a regular basis, and I think later on, we start to have a conversation as a group, and I think Grace talked to me about what our partner with her to support this, to at that point of time, the idea of church planting was still not particularly clear just yet, but sort of grow this group to make it it's like people reading the Bible together, just hanging out and all that sort of thing, and I think that was, I started to notice, I think on hindsight, I started to notice there was a lot of this like soul with our language style in there. It's like low key, long term relationship. And I was like,
Jesus changed everything.
It's like, what was that about? It sounds right. I think I do like that idea. Like I do really like that idea, and so I sort of started, and the longer we do it, and then we just keep talking about it, and then I was like, yep, that sounds like a good idea, and especially when I think we start to have the idea of, okay, maybe we can turn it into something more long term and to be a church and that sort of thing. Then we went through a period of time where we just spend time to think about, okay, are we in?
Yeah.
Like, and I think all of us take the time and we keep talking about it. We try to line up, what's our understanding of church and stuff, because we're all mindful that you're not just going to another church. You, in fact, trying to start a church from scratch. And so, I think there was a bit of a, I don't know, like sort of wrestling in my mind, all this sort of thing, what does it mean? But in the end, I sort of think that's a great opportunity, and I feel like at my stage of life, I was like, oh, you know what, that would be a good little challenge. I mean, nothing wrong with me continue to just go to a local church. That's fine. I could do that, but I also feel like if God presented this opportunity in front of me, and I think it also just lined up a lot of my initial thinking anyway, is this idea of a local church, about serving the local community. Then I was like, yep, that seems to all line up very well. And so I make a decision. I was like, yep, I'm in. I still remember I found a time to call my pastor in Chatswood Presbyterian Church. It's a great guy. I have a lot of respect for him. I don't think we know each other sort of very well, I would say. But I kind of feel like I need to tell him, like, so, hey, look, this is what happened. And I remember it was just a pretty quick phone conversation because we don't normally talk that much, in all fairness. But I think he was very supportive. He was like, this is probably the best reason for someone to leave a church.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I think, he told me that. So that was really great. And so, that's how it all started. Back in 2020.
Yeah. Was it helpful for you as a Christian to think through? You're obviously thinking through what your idea of church is and thinking through how you approach that. Was that a helpful exercise? Going away, taking some time to step away and think about, am I really in? Was that helpful for you for forming maybe some of your own ideas and thinking through them in a more deep way? Because lots of people, like, it's easy to just rock up to church and do church that way and not really think about it for a long time. You've obviously had a bunch of experience going to a few different churches. But
Yep. Definitely. I think sometimes you don't even know how to think about certain topic because you were never asked or required to think that way. Like Brandon, you were saying, like, going to church, there is already a church. And you kind of, over time, you kind of just get used to it. That's just how it works in general, right? And but then suddenly now we need to think about what is church. And you're like, you thought you know, but then if this is like an exam question in front of you, I'm like, I'm leaving it blank. I'm clearly leaving it blank. And then you just sort of start to, I think in my head I'm trying to, go through my memory. Oh, is there any verses I could think of and all that sort of thing? Like, of course, the one that stands out was in the gospel in Jesus' teaching where, 2 to 3 gather together in my name. So I think the idea. So I think you kind of do a bit of this like bottom up sort of approach. You kind of think about, okay, try to find the bits and pieces. What is church, and then I think talking and working together with the core team, Grace, Michelle, Ian, and Louisa, has been incredibly helpful because I think we are all just on the same journey trying to work through it. And I give a lot of credit to Ian because he's just like have this really solid way of approaching it. He's often like he probably think that I'm speaking too highly of him, but he really is really good at like doing the background research, and then in our catch up, like there will be this like links and points, and then he will write a bit of a summary and and I'm just like, okay, all that I could think of is a verse, and that was still in my memory. Whereas he probably like read different articles and really get into it. I think that just helps for us to. I think we all sort of bounce idea and then we talk about it, and then you just come to a point to really come to that understanding. Church is about relationship, right? I think a lot of the time we make at the intellectual level, but now that we are starting something, then we realize, I think we start to get an idea what it means. And I think there's a lot of focus, and I think that's also the soul revival DNA in there. Like that grace kind of really help us to guide us a little bit in there in terms of how we need to be good friends first, how we need to have good relationship together. That is not about how we could have a building or have a big number, all that sort of thing. I mean, those will hopefully come, but ultimately what gel us together is our relationship with each other as well as with God. And then I could see how we organize our time, how we structure our service and Bible study, how we orient our group as well. It's always that, how can we grow closer, deeper with each other and with God? That's often the first question. And so I think that is perhaps the, just sort of help me to see, okay, that's church. That's cool. Church. It's a congregation of people who are with each other and doing life with each other. And I think over time I feel like we're getting into that direction. Because I definitely, at least for me, when I go to church, I don't feel like it's an event. I just go and leave and cool. So see you next week. Good luck. So not that, but more that we just know we're in it. We know that we're in each other's life. I think that's the idea.
I mean, really Stu talks about that deep and abiding love and how we express that out as a Jesus-shaped communion. I think that's where what you're talking about is that, and I think that's what, when I first became a Christian, that was something that was really attractive to me as well. The churches that these guys really want to know each other and really want to express that together, and the reason for that is because of Jesus dying on the cross. And the love that God's shown through that. Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense, what you're saying. I mean, it's cool that it made you think about that too. And I mean, it's really exciting that you like the idea of how we express church here at Soul Revival too, which is really fun.
It's a learning, I have to say. It's just learning, because I think, and I love this is learning through experience. You're forced to read, it's different. Because, I mean, I grew up in a Chinese church. Even after coming to Australia, I spent probably the first 1 or 2 years in a Chinese church that before I moved into an English-speaking church, for example. So I think just the that's definitely a cultural component. I think a lot of the Chinese, sometimes we could approach church can be in a very sort of task-oriented, mechanical, sort of getting things done sort of approach. And so, and it's not just Chinese church. Sometimes other churches, non-Chinese church could just do the same thing. So I think in Solis, this is one thing that I noticed that I need to learn is this idea of, for example, even the idea of hanging out. I was like, what is that? Hanging out. Okay, hanging out. What is that? Because I'm very used to the very goal-oriented sort of. There's something to do. There's some outcome out of it. That sort of thing. Yep. So this idea of just even the other day, I can't remember. It's chilling. We're just chilling. And I was like, okay. So what do we do when we chill? It's just actually struck me quite a bit. It's but at the same time, you also come to that realization. Usually, those special moments where those really deep connections, sort of that conversation, and I think, for example, last week I feel that we witnessed that a little bit. Is we have. Just another day at church where you have service and you share a meal together. But then somehow you just, people just grow into that little moment where they just, I can see everyone just having a moment with, talking to each other and, feeling comfortable. You can see people just sharing that. You can just see it. You can, because I think we cannot tell the difference when we are sort of get into the networking mode, sort of like very almost a bit like very polite and.
What do you do like that?
Yeah. Oh yeah, you know the news and how's the economy? Oh, it's bad. Oh, inflation, the interest rate. How are you coping? Like you know, that sort of stuff. But then you see when other people just like talking about something more substantial and really sharing something close in their heart. Like you hear the vibe and and I was like, oh yeah. You can't plan this. Like you could facilitate it. I suppose you could, put things together to really give that the platform. But I started to realize the chilling is important ingredient. The idea of doing boring things and mundane things and together, and not necessarily with some crazy projects. So I think that challenged the Asianness in me as a person. But it's a great learning, I have to say, because I think that's where relationship really grows.
It's really lovely to hear that, though. I mean, because remember, I visited when you guys were still in Grace and Michelle's lounge room, and I felt that. I was in many long conversations with Michelle and Gerald and so many people over there for a long time. So. Yeah. I think you guys are doing it from my experience. So, that's great that you continue to see that happening as well as you're now moving into having a venue or a place to actually meet and stuff like that. So
absolutely.
I'm going to run out of time because I have to head off soon. But I just want to ask the final question. Though,
absolutely.
Is we ask everyone on the podcast now, looking back over your life, and I feel like we've. Maybe not even scratch the surface because you've got so many different aspects of your life that you've told us about already. But from becoming a Christian in Macau and then now where you are now living in Sydney, what do you reckon you wish you knew that you know now as an older Christian that you wish you knew when you were a younger Christian?
I think still an ongoing thing, but if I could time travel and tell the younger self, so to speak, it would be sort of a bit cliche, but really like just trust God. Like He got it. Like don't because I grew up quite a bit of an anxious kid. I have to say, like I'm a bit anxious kid. So I was always a bit worrying that he this and that, different things.
Well, you talked about your fear of death and stuff like that.
Yeah. It came very young. I don't know why. It was weird. But so I was a bit of an anxious kid growing up, and so I think even as a Christian, for example, I think my early Christian journey would have been, there was a period of time where I was like, oh, am I safe? Am I actually safe? Like and then you get into that sinner's prayer zone mentality, sort of like whenever the pastor invite people to pray, I'll be like, okay, let me do it one more time, just in case Jesus didn't just to make sure Jesus got in, like just in case he didn't hear me last time, that sort of thing. Like you kind of have this sort of just even as a Christian, you kind of have this anxiety about different things. But I think it's still something that I need to learn right now, even so-called as an older Christian, is I think just practicing that faith and realizing that, hey, you know what, God gets you. Like Jesus accomplished everything. So so life could turn different way, but so far in the end, everything turns out okay. It turns out fine. Like even if it doesn't, like God got it. So have faith, believe in Him. Sometimes I often have this picture of Jesus just saying this, like, ye of little faith. Like, come on, like, just, I got this, mate. Like, so don't be scared. Don't be so fearful, and just, get on with life, be faithful and move forward. So yeah, I would have tell the, 18, 20, the younger version of Weng about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. I feel like doing this podcast, you feel really encouraged. And it's been really cool to have a couple of you guys from Ryde come on the podcast and come from probably what we would say a different cultural background as us, but it's the same thing, right? Yeah. Being a Christian is the same thing, no matter what it is. And I think it's really lovely, and I really love that, like, and I mean, I can kind of echo some of the things you said, that I used to struggle with anxiety when I was younger too, and I wish I knew
similar thing. Was, hey man. And you used mate in the right context there too. You said, come on, mate. God's got it.
I've learned to, learn to, you know what? I need to embrace that.
Yeah.
The mateship.
I think you did really well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I just love having everyone on the podcast, but I really like having you today on the podcast.
Because it's
really awesome.
Thank you.
And hearing your story is, again, like, it's just like, it doesn't matter what background we have. It's like God's the same everywhere. And that's what you're saying is, like, have the faith because God will. I mean, you're talking about moving around, and I just think, like, he puts us in the right places regardless of whether we're ready or not to.
Yeah.
And we just need to be faithful to him.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
Any final thoughts there, Braden, before we wrap it up?
I'm just extremely encouraged. Fun way to start.
Yeah.
Start the day.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go.
Absolutely. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, it really gets me fired up.
Yeah,
move forward. That's right. Move forward under God. So it's probably time to wrap up the chips. But thank you so much, Weng, for coming all the way from. You still live at Parramatta?
Yep, still in Parramatta.
All the way from Parramatta. Just coming to record a podcast.
Yep.
First and last, as you said. No deaths.
Yeah. Well, if I don't put on too much weight, then maybe I will consider coming back.
That's awesome. So thank you so much for that.
Pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
And of course. We always finish with a one-way when we wrap up the chips. So if you're happy to do that, we'll do that. And finish
Absolutely.
Up the podcast. All right. No worries.
One way.